there, thanks for joining us here on Crossroads Politics on WTHR Plus with just days to go before the May primary. I'm Dustin Grove.
And I'm Emily Longnecker. We're seeing a huge surge in early voting in this primary.
Yeah, the numbers are pretty incredible. Take a look here. Compared to the 2024 election year, with presidential candidates on the ballot, early voting is up 25% in Hamilton County and 69% in Marion County.
And when you compare it to the last midterm election, it's even more stark, up 91% in Marion County and up a whopping 250% in Hamilton County. All of those numbers were through Wednesday, so they may have changed, but clearly a lot of interest in two of the state's most populous counties.
So we're joined by Nikki Kelly, editor of the Capitol Chronicle. Indiana had pretty terrible voter participation, not only in recent years, but in recent decades. So why do you think things are different this time around so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot going on in the world, and especially in the federal level. So even though we don't necessarily have, a presidential race on the top, people just want to have their say, right? And they want to be able to join in on the discussions. And so I think that's probably drawing people in.
Nikki, is a surge in interest in the primary a warning for incumbents this time around?
I mean, historically, higher turnout does work against incumbents, and so that's something to watch for. Very interested to see how this plays out, of course, in some of the Senate races we've seen in Indiana. And yeah, I mean, I expect it to be one of the more exciting election nights that we've had in Indiana, where generally who's going to win going in.
Right, it's pretty slow, pretty quiet. Millions of dollars have been poured in advertising. If you're watching, if you've watched TV in the last couple of weeks, we've just been flooded with campaign ads.
Yeah. The 5th and the 7th congressional district, a lot of folks are watching both of those.
Absolutely.
A lot of candidates there. Okay, and one issue we're expecting to impact the election is gas prices.
Yeah, this week, Indiana saw the biggest spike in the nation. Not a title we should celebrate. We went up 80 cents in a single week. Some reports were even more than that. Gas prices are now flirting with $5 a gallon, nearing 2022 highs, and the worst may still be to come.
Experts say refinery capacity in the Midwest is snarled with the huge demand for American oil as the Iran conflict drags on and continues to disrupt global oil supplies. Prices have been high for a while, and in April, Governor Mike Braun suspended the gas tax, but that is set to expire this weekend.
On the 8th, on Thursday, we asked the governor if he planned to extend that gas tax holiday. Here's what he had to say.
I did decide to do a 30-day pause on the sales tax on fuel, and I'm likely to renew that. That was a 17-cent savings. Now it will be even more because the wholesale cost of gas has gone up.
All right, so not necessarily a surprise here, given that prices have gone up since the original gas tax holiday, but is that enough to move the needle for the governor, you think?
Well, I mean, I think he's indicated he's pretty much, he keeps saying likely, but I'm pretty sure he's going to continue the 30-day sales tax holiday. And this is just on the sales tax. I think the bigger question was whether he would expand it to the gas tax, which is 36 cents a gallon and would make a huge difference. And I think it's pretty clear he's not ready to go there. But, at least consumers will be able to save in May if he does extend 23 cents a gallon instead of the 17 cents. And that is changed every month depending on the costs of a gallon of gas.
Is there a scenario, Nikki, where the governor calls a special session to suspend that gas excise tax? I know Democrats were saying he doesn't need to call a special session. He doesn't need this. He can do it on his own. But there had been then some kind of discussion that he would have to.
I don't think he can do it on his own. The law is pretty clear that he can issue one emergency and renew it once, and then the General Assembly has to be involved. And so, I think I heard him on Tony Katz recently, and he said that he did not think that was necessarily a special session worthy item.
Okay. I'm wondering, so back in 2000, 2001, when Frank O'Bannon last did this, it was just the one, he did it for the 30 days and extended it, and then it was over.
I think his were 60 days, and the law actually allows the governor to do 60 days at a time. I'm not sure why he chose 30 days, but he could technically do 60 days.
Okay. All right. To be continued.
To be continued.
Now to next week's election and its potential consequences. Even though State Senate leader Rod Bray is not on the ballot this time around, he is the ultimate target of President Trump's demand for political retribution. 7 Republican senators who voted in December against redrawing Indiana's U.S. House district maps are facing Trump-endorsed challengers, backed by millions of dollars in spending by national pro-redistricting groups. So the question is, will Bray be able to hold on to his leadership position? In an interview Wednesday with the Indiana Capitol Chronicle, he kind of brushed off questions about threats to his 8-year tenure. Nikki, do you think he could be in trouble?
I think he could be in trouble. I think honestly it would only take 3 or 4 changes in the makeup to maybe swing that leadership vote. And so, you know, and of course he's plowing money in to try to save these incumbents. Of course, not only just to save his own self. I think he sincerely believes they've done good work. You know, he talked to us and he said, you know, he was kind of like, the idea that these incumbents are being labeled as not Republican enough is crazy. And he went through a litany of things they've done, you know, to, you know, tax cuts and universal vouchers and, you know, cutting property taxes, and said, you know, these people that are being attacked and being targeted are, you know, longtime Republicans, and they are just being basically relentlessly attacked for one single vote.
So ultimately, when his Senate seat comes up for re-election, do you think he's at risk then? Are people's memories that long?
I don't know. I think that's a pretty far away. I think it's much more likely that his leadership vote would go out. And some of that will depend, you know, we got to wait till the November elections, because, you know, if the Democrats take over a seat or if Republicans lose a seat, that changes the math, right? And so we'll have to really keep an eye on that. I do know that there are people working behind the scenes to line up support. You know, the way these leadership votes go is, one of the things you promise is chairmanships for committees and things like that. So, you know, definitely we will get a big indication Tuesday night whether that could be a problem.
Wow. Okay. Thanks.
On Tuesday, Governor Braun announced an initiative to give Indiana businesses help using artificial intelligence, AI.
Yeah, the initiative, called In AI, will include a website with resources and help businesses partner with Indiana's higher education system on AI projects.
We've all heard about AI, the mystery of it, how it's going to change everything in front of us. Well, I'd say take a deep breath. It's going to make a big difference. This program will help businesses adopt AI in practical ways.
The state hopes to reach 1 million employees and thousands of employers around Indiana.
But Democrats are urging caution. Take a look.
We need to take a deep look at this. We've got to say how much electricity and water is going to be devoted to the data centers to create the artificial intelligence, and what's it going to do to jobs.
So this is an interesting sort of balancing act for elected leaders right now. You've got the desire to bring in business investment. You've got to do that. But you've also got some real anger from voters who blame these AI data centers for rising utility costs, or concern about future rising utility costs. So in that atmosphere, the governor also kind of hedged on how this would be paid for, saying it would depend on how well we're doing through economic development. So what do you make of this announcement this week?
Yeah, I think Governor Mike Braun and honestly some of the key other Republican leaders in the Indiana politics have been very supportive of data centers. And I think they're trying to show ways to Hoosiers that artificial intelligence, which is largely what the data centers are, can be used to help businesses grow. And you know, I think they're trying to put like a little bit of a positive spin on something that has become so incredibly controversial.
You know, just this week, a massive data center planned for Virginia collapsed in the face of opposition from residents. Democrats are increasingly calling for a moratorium on new data centers. We know several Indiana counties have passed data center moratoria, and these are not Democratic strongholds. In fact, President Trump won every one of them in 2024. So is there a disconnect between local Republicans and state GOP leaders when it comes to this issue?
Absolutely. And it's not only local Republicans. I mean, it's just citizens in general have just completely revolted on data centers. They don't understand what the state or their local communities are getting from them, but they certainly understand what they're taking, which is water and electricity.
And we saw lawmakers address this sort of in the last session, right? Or it may have even been the session before that when they instituted that rule that data centers have to cover at least 80% of the costs to take the energy to build it. And then we had an announcement last week. One of these companies said, we're going to pay 100% of it.
Yeah, I think that's the only way they're going to get through at this point is definitely, covering their own freight, so to speak. I was on a call with the AARP this week who were cautioning against data center growth and how it impacts, obviously, senior citizens. And one of the interesting things, though, is also, we're not treating similar high yield users the same as data centers, right? No one's saying you shouldn't have this steel plant because they use a lot of water. And so we do have to be careful how we treat one industry over another.
We've also seen, speaking of this GOP state leader split with local Republican leaders, we've seen it with the SMR, the small modular reactors debate, and also with wind energy too, and solar energy.
Absolutely.
So do you think this in AI is kind of a way for state leaders to kind of promote AI, thus promote data centers and kind of get the public more used to here's the good of AI, here's what AI can do for you kind of
I think it definitely is. And that's why they didn't really lay out, here's how much we're going to spend. I think they're going to see how this goes and see if they can provide some positive examples of AI and data center usage.
Yeah, some of the details were vague at that presser. Yeah.
Well, another issue with some disconnect with voters is the debate over whether to legalize marijuana.
Yeah, the federal government has opened the way for medical marijuana, and we asked the governor if Indiana should take advantage of that.
I think the main question is you're going to need to ask the legislators and the leaders of those two chambers to see what they're thinking, because I'm clear in terms of where I'm at, and I think just like anything, you got to take what's evolved over time. You stick your head in the sand, you're generally going to make the wrong decision.
So Nikki, bringing you back in, it seems like the governor is saying the ball is in lawmakers' court, but then he kind of is also suggesting he's sort of in support of it, or is he? I don't know.
I mean, I think he's been clear for a while that he's very open, especially to the medicinal part.
Right.
And so, I think he's understanding that Hoosiers are using this, they're taking their money to other states, and it's time for us to deal with it, one way or the other. And he's definitely putting the onus on lawmakers to decide.
And speaking of numbers, take a look at this. Even with marijuana being fully illegal in Indiana, Hoosiers are still spending, as Nikki mentioned, a lot of money, about $2 billion on cannabis. That's according to a state commission study through the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation. That study was done by the Rand Corporation. And it also found that 44% of Hoosiers live within 50 miles of a licensed dispensary in another state. So it's not like it's difficult to drive over and buy whatever you want. Also, almost all of us, 96%, live within 100 miles. This study estimates that legalizing adult use cannabis could generate about $180 million a year in tax revenue. Now, to put that into perspective, while it's a lot of money to us, right?
Right.
It's not when you throw it into the larger state budget. But money is money. Do you think that this potential revenue could have an impact on lawmakers?
Yeah, I don't think the revenue is necessarily going to push it. When we're talking about a $34 billion state budget, $180 million, it can cover a few key things. It could, for instance, help get people off the child care wait list. That's an example of something that you could point out. But you also got to remember that there's probably regulation and also costs that would come with legalization. So it's not going to be 100% profit to use wherever they want.
Is this going to come down to leadership at the State House? Do you see them budging on this? Because in past sessions, a lot of these bills don't even get a hearing.
Yeah, and a lot of what they said is we need the federal government to act, right? They need to legalize it federally for us to act. And so we'll see if this kind of half step on the medicinal side is enough to push them forward.
Whatever happens, the governor has said he wants to bring law enforcement into the conversation. He's said that from the beginning whenever he's asked about this.
And do you think that his openness, more so than previous administrations, may help the cause?
It can help it, but honestly, unless he's going to make it a major issue and put the bully pulpit, him just saying I'm open isn't going to guide the discussion.
I mean, certainly there are a lot of veterans groups that I talk to that are advocating all of the time down at the State House, have met with the governor about this, at least for legalizing medicinally. They talk about that a lot.
Absolutely, and he's heard all those, and it sounds like, again, he's open, but open is different than leading
Making
the
it
charge.
a priority.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Nikki. Coming up, uncertainty in Indy.
Will Democratic Mayor Joe Hogsett run for a fourth term?
Somebody in Indianapolis likes me because I've won 3 mayoral elections.
We'll look at what it means for the announced candidates so far as well.
But first, the Iran conflict continues to drag on and drag down the economy. The Trump administration defends the fight on Capitol Hill. Next on Crossroads Politics. Welcome back. We've hit the 60-day mark in the conflict with Iran.
And that is a critical moment as Republican lawmakers are facing a deadline for Congress to intervene in the conflict. Top Trump administration officials are defending the military action on Capitol Hill. Meanwhile, Americans at the polls are feeling the stress and, most recently, the high cost at the gas pump.
Yeah, here's Alice Barr.
Hi there. Right now, negotiations are hung up, with Iran pushing to separate nuclear talks from the fate of the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump says that's a no-go. And now, even as the administration works to find a path to peace, top Republicans are insisting we're not at war. 60 days into the war with Iran, a fragile ceasefire is holding, though American warships are on patrol, enforcing a blockade of Iranian ports. While on Capitol Hill, Republican leadership is blocking a vote to curb President Trump's war powers, despite a deadline today for congressional approval.
I don't think we have any active kinetic military bombing, firing, anything like that right now. We're trying to broker a peace, and I would be very reluctant to get in front of the administration in the midst of these very sensitive negotiations.
A 1973 law outlines that the president must stop and remove military forces from conflict if Congress doesn't authorize a war within 60 days. Pressed by NBC's Ryan Noble, Speaker Johnson said we're not at war. Again, citing the ceasefire. A senior administration official gave the same reasoning, telling NBC News hostilities terminated when the ceasefire began. Democrats reject that.
Being in the region, not engaged actively in kinetic force or kinetic action isn't what the law says. After 60 days, he has 30 days to withdraw.
Talks are stalled over a broader peace deal.
They want to make a deal badly. We have a problem because nobody knows for sure who the leaders are.
And with shipping through the vital Strait of Hormuz still choked off, gas prices keep pushing higher. President Trump offering assurances while acknowledging the conflict continues.
The gas will go down. As soon as the war's over, it'll drop like a rock.
Back on Capitol Hill, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth again defending the war and a new $1.5 trillion defense budget request for 2027, heavily criticized by Democrats. That funding request is partially to replace weapons used in the war so far, though Secretary Hegseth also pointed to weapons that were sent to Ukraine under the last administration. The Pentagon now says the war with Iran has cost roughly $25 billion up to this point. In Washington, Alice Barr, NBC News.
The other big national news this week was the alleged assassination attempt at the White House Correspondents' Dinner last Sunday.
Yeah, the suspect in that almost shooting made his first court appearance this week. New video released Friday allegedly shows the suspected shooter running through a security checkpoint with a shotgun in hand.
The shooting happened a floor above the ballroom, right above the ballroom where the dinner was supposed to happen. At the dinner was a collection of journalists, a lot of journalists, including a former producer here at WTHR.
Yeah, Toby Capian was a longtime producer here before moving to EWTN, the Global Catholic Network. He was sitting near the doors when the shooting happened.
The shooting happened kind of, right behind the doors past us. Had the gunman been successful, he would have burst through the doors right by where we were sitting. And in fact, we were so close to where it happened that one of the women who was in that hallway where it actually went down, she ran into the ballroom, dove under our table. That's how close we were. So that part was pretty memorable.
And terrifying. I mean, because we said that it happened a floor above, but really it was the floor and then an open staircase right down into the ballroom.
That's right.
So where was the president when all this happened?
So Toby told me that the president was on stage, dinner had started, and he actually saw the president being evacuated.
I had a lot of disbelief, right? You just can't believe that just happened. So there was certainly that aspect of it. And I'll tell you too, because the president's life has been under threat, this is the third assassination attempt on his life. I wasn't sure if the gunman was successful or not. With everybody down on the floor, that type of thing, and the president being whisked off, I didn't know if he had been hit. I heard the gunshots. I heard the pop, 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 pop. I see the president getting drug away. I didn't know if he was injured or not. So just as an American citizen, I'm worried. Never mind politics. You don't want to see the head of state hurt or killed, that type of thing. So I was just really hoping that was not the case. And it wasn't until later that we learned that he was okay, the cabinet secretaries were okay. And I should say that too, because our table was right on the center aisle. Yes, they evacuated the president backstage, the vice president backstage, but all those cabinet secretaries, they were getting whisked away right past our table. The Secretary of War, the FBI director, all those folks.
This is the third very public attempt on President Trump's life. Did he reflect on that at all?
He did a little bit. He told me he thinks that the heated rhetoric on all sides may be contributing to this.
I think just that bipartisan nature, there's so much hatred in politics right now beyond just the normal policy debates, right? It's just really become very personal. There's so much animus towards our elected leaders, and it bothers me, right? I see these people up close virtually every day. I've covered Trump, I've covered Biden. I don't want to see harm come to any of these folks. And I would just, everybody talks about lowering the temperature in this country. That's my own personal belief as well.
Yeah, he talked about being bothered. I hope that would bother everybody, just from a human standpoint. We should say neither Toby nor anybody at that dinner was hurt in that shooting.
I've been to that dinner 4 separate times when I went to school and worked in D.C. And it's really a nice night. They call it the nerd prom, actually, right? Because it brings together all of the press.
And it's so full. I mean, it looks shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, it's shoulder to shoulder. It is a huge ballroom. And for Toby, our former colleague, to be at the table outside the door where all of this is happening, I mean, just to hear from him. He said he stayed pretty calm during all of it, and he's a calm guy by nature. I can tell you after working with him for several years, which is what you want in a producer.
Absolutely.
But yeah, and he just a very calm guy, and he said his dad instinct kind of kicked in. He'd been to the dinner before, so he was kind of concerned about the people at his table, and also his journalism instinct kicked in too. So he pulled up his phone and started rolling. So
I'd like to say I would react the same. I'm not sure that
I'm not
that
sure
I would
that
have.
I don't know.
Yeah.
People react in different ways in different situations.
Glad they're okay.
Thankfully, everyone's okay. Yeah.
Absolutely. Bipartisan outcry in the Indianapolis City County Council
over big problems with a fast-growing agency.
A lot of what's in the audit, the findings, have already been addressed.
The questions about the Office of Public Health and Safety and how counselors are responding. Next on Crossroads Politics.
We're back now with questions about millions of dollars meant to keep people safe and healthy in Indianapolis.
This week, we dug through a new audit of the Office of Public Health and Safety, and some of the results are raising concerns. Our Matthew Foltz looked at what stood out and how OPHS leaders are now addressing the issues.
A financial audit for the Office of Public Health and Safety here in Indianapolis reveals the agency lacked oversight in many areas.
I knew that there might be some challenges related to, or some findings related to those contractual and financial concerns.
Andrew Merkley is the director of OPHS. He's been in the role for a little over a year. He tells me this is the first audit for the agency since the city created it in 2016. The audit explains that 6 of the 8 findings were high risk. Some include insufficient invoice documentation, where 84% of the contracts the audit reviewed had missing or incomplete documentation. Another high-risk finding shows that OPHS awarded contracts to staff and connections.
There's ongoing investigations into those particular concerns, and we are addressing those through additional ethics training and procurement training for our team.
Merkley says they're also working to address other areas.
Rather than changing our programming, we need to change internal processes because, again, as I said, the impact is evident and we can demonstrate that through data.
We had a pretty good experience and grateful for the opportunity to work with them.
Adrian Burney is a barber who worked with OPHS more than 2 years ago during their Summer in the City program. He's just hoping now they get on the right track.
You know, whatever it is, I just hope that it gets cleared up. And like I said, be able to resume the work that they're doing in the community to drive down violence and make an impact in the city of Indianapolis and our communities.
In the meantime, Merkley says he and his team want to make sure another bad audit doesn't happen again.
And we're implementing additional safeguards to ensure that moving forward, the next decade of OPHS is more successful than the past decade.
Reporting in Indy, I'm Matthew Foltz, 13 News.
City County Council President Maggie Lewis sent a statement which said in part, quote, "The City County Council will continue to closely monitor the implementation of these corrective actions to ensure that public resources are managed responsibly and that programs are delivering results for our residents." We have the full statement and more at WTHR.com.
OPHS has been a point of pride, right, for Mayor Hogsett, his administration, part of their plan to reduce violence in Indianapolis since the pandemic surge that swept the country.
Yeah, absolutely. But even with the cloud hanging over the agency, Hogsett is not ruling out a run for a 4th term.
Ultimately, I'll make a decision that's based on whatever legacy I'd like to leave our city and how far along we are in promoting that legacy. It goes without saying that I'm halfway through my 3rd term. So I would let that speak for itself. Somebody in Indianapolis likes me because I've won 3 mayoral elections, but that's not the basis upon which one makes your mind up. You make it up based on not necessarily who you'd be running against, but what you represent, what you're running for, and how those things come together, and the legacy that you'd like to leave.
So if Hogsett decides to throw his hat into the ring and run for what would be a historic 4th term, that would make that race really interesting, the primary race, right?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, we're still a ways out, but 2 Democrats are already lined up. State Senator Andrea Hundley is expected to announce her candidacy formally this month, and Hogsett's longtime ally, former City County Council President Bob Osili, has already formally launched his campaign. So Hogsett would be running against established popular Democrats in any primary.
His administration is also still stinging from its handling of the Thomas Cook sexual misconduct scandal. Cook, a long-term aide to Hogsett, was accused by Lauren Roberts and Caroline Ellert of sexual misconduct and abuse. He was never charged with a crime, but the City County Council launched an investigation after the women came forward publicly. An independent report found ethical concerns, and multiple city county councilors, including multiple Democrats, fellow Democrats, called on Hogsett to resign.
Yeah, that was all last year. This year, the Indy Star reported that a grand jury is investigating both the allegations and unlawful pecuniary interest in a contract of a public servant and/or former public servant. The Star tied that investigation into city development deals involving Cook after he was forced out of Hogsett's administration in 2020.
All right, to be continued.
To be continued.
And that does it for this week's episode of Crossroads Politics. Remember, primary election day is Tuesday, so be sure to stream our special coverage all night long here on WTHR+. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dustin Grove.
And I'm Emily Longnecker. For Nikki, Matthew, and all of us here at 13 News, thanks for watching. We hope to see you next time.